Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach.
All right, Annie. So we talked last week about Annie kind of, changing some rhythms and not always being connected.
Yeah.
And then, so she's like, I'm turning off notifications, not going to have all this stuff from my email.
Oh,
and then
man.
I write her an email to prepare for this podcast. And she's like, I don't know anymore because I'm not looking at it
I'm
all
not
the time.
looking at it all the time.
Yeah.
Loosey-goosey.
So what do you want from me, Ben? Right? That's what you're saying. Do you want me to have an open brain, or do you want me to respond to your endless emails?
I need an open brain, so I've disconnected from Gmail.
This is
that's great.
phase
So
one. This is the cleansing phase.
Oh, yeah.
Now she has to rebuild.
No, I think there will be more cleanse before there's a rebuild.
That's so good.
Go
though,
off
isn't
the
it?
grid.
Okay.
Don't you feel better though, like your brain?
I do. Yes, I do feel like I'm checking my email when I take control of your life before your life takes control of you. So
good.
yeah.
I think that is going to be a huge part of the future is
Agreed.
How do you
Agreed.
not be discipled by your device and you disciple it. You tell it where to go.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to talk about today was a TED Talk that we had to listen in class, and I thought it was really interesting. I've read some of this guy's books. I think say his name, Johann Hari. He's a British journalist, and he's written different books on mental health. Actually wrote one on stolen focus was one on some of the topics we talked about last week, but he's written one on connections. And the title of his TED Talk is one of the most listened to TED Talks. Is a little bit
attention grabbing.
Yeah, it's an attention grabber. Everything you know about addictions is wrong, which is not totally true, but it was a really good TED Talk. And I'll give a brief synopsis, encourage you to watch it. We'll put the link in the show notes. At least we're going to say we're going to do it. Matt, you'll do it, right?
Huh?
You'll put the link in the
Yes,
show notes.
I
Yeah,
will.
all right. Anyways, the idea, basically the point of his talk was that the opposite of addiction is connection. And if a person has healthy human connections, they're much less susceptible to addiction. And he gave all these different statistics and examples. So one thing was a rat experiment where rats were given a choice between water or water laced with cocaine or heroin or something. And they always chose the water with the drug until they OD'd. But then they had a cage that was like rat park, he said. Lots of other rats in this cage and lots of balls to play with, lots of things it was rat heaven. Lots of mates, all that kind of stuff. And they did not choose the water laced with drugs, but just regular water. They didn't seem to be interested in that. And then he also talked about during Vietnam War that 20% of the soldiers in Vietnam were addicted to heroin. They were taking heroin. And so the government thought, oh crap, when they come back from war, we're going to have a huge heroin problem. But it didn't happen. And the study shows that it's kind of like Rat Park. When they were in this trauma of war and this hyper vigilant state of war, like they went to the heroin. But when they came back and they were safe and they had family and they had purpose, they didn't do heroin. Then he talked about how some of the drugs that we take for surgery are basically heroin. And, when you have hip surgery, you don't necessarily always get addicted to it. So he really was talking about the environmental factors and the social factors connected to addiction. I thought it was interesting. Now, what I think this isn't the whole story and not everything we think about addiction is wrong is like environment is one big factor. Also, there is a biological factor and there is a neurological factor and other kinds of factors that go in, not just environment. But I think it's a huge thing that we don't talk about. And so you see the rise in addictive behavior, whether that's drugs, alcohol, which they're all going up. Fentanyl is the worst one right now. That's skyrocketing. Or just addictions to our phone or to whatever, food, sex, all those kinds of things. you wonder if we had more meaningful connections. According to him, he'd say a lot of it would go away. So there's a synopsis. What do you think, Matt, from you watched it?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. We all did.
Wait a
It's part
second.
of
I
our
got the
homework.
gist. I got things to say.
Oh man.
Oh, one other thing.
Oh.
He brought up Portugal, and Portugal did not. They put together a bunch of scientists and researchers and said we have a huge problem in Portugal of drugs, and so we're going to ask you to come up with the best solution. Whatever you say, we're going to do. And their solution was legalize all drugs. So they legalized everything, which is crazy. But then they took all the money that they were putting into policing and criminalizing drugs into kind of these social programs to give people work, a purpose, and community. And so they dropped the drug problem by 50% in Portugal. So that was, I think Switzerland did something similar, or there's other places that have done something similar. So there you go. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay, so I thought the video was super interesting. I have a lot of reactions to it. But maybe what I'll start with is like I guess part of me would just be like what they did in Portugal, like why don't we try it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
It's too big. We're too big.
we are
Far too big.
huge. And I like there's something in when you hear a story like that, you're just like, well, like we should just try it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something deep rooted inside me that says that would never in a million years work.
Look at
It would
our
make the problem
politics
worse.
currently. How are we supposed to get anything done? I mean,
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to change policies, but I think in our microcosm, you
Sure.
wonder if could we take some of these principles and so I think maybe one of the principle is just yelling at people and criminalizing
Yeah.
people is not going to necessarily get them to stop.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start asking more why questions, like what are you missing? Why are you looking for this? Why do you need this?
Yeah.
So those kinds of
Well,
things.
and I think generally that's right. Like I've found that like anytime someone has a problem, that it's best to listen first before you start either making accusations or assumptions. And you know, I think that's something that I just do internally, where you're just like, oh, geez, you made your bed, like, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, best to listen. I'm thinking about at least the people I know and in my life, and not a lot of addicts, and I wouldn't say that I've ever been addicted to anything. But it seems like at least when the mental health is the worst, you know, and the anger issues or the depression or the anxieties are the highest. To me, I don't feel like I've ever lacked for connection, because I've always had, I feel like, family or friends that I could go to for the most part. Though, I mean, I will say, like, maybe you have friends, but you maybe don't always want to talk to them, so you aren't connected in the way where you would be willing to bring them issues. I think that's fair, but it seems to me like having purpose and direction
Yeah.
and some like structure to your life
Yeah.
is a much better, to me anyway, has always been a much better remedy for that kind of thing. Like even just simply like, you know, you're in high school, and like every high schooler should just work a part-time job. Like just have some responsibility and have something in your life that you have to do, but that you kind of hate. Like that's a really good thing to learn. And so I don't know, I guess it didn't really particularly strike a chord with me, the video, like personally, but I've never been addicted to any drugs.
What do you think, Annie? What's your reaction?
Yeah, I think the purpose thing was something that was going through my head also. So purpose, I think boredom,
Yeah.
which is kind of tied to purpose.
Right.
You know, bored or feelings of uselessness, again, back to purpose, or like, what is your gift and how do you cultivate that and share it? And so a lack, I would say like boredom or a lack of purpose is probably a big deal. Or I think escapism too, just like if you're in a bad situation, like with the Vietnam, it's like you're in a bad, so you're using it as an escape piece. And it's really fortunate that, like the guys in Vietnam could come out of that because, then you start thinking about their biological or neurological, like, components that would allow them to stop because so I think if you have the perfect storm of an individual who is bored, hopeless, without purpose, depressed, possibly in a bad situation or had a bad experience, PTSD.
Of course, you're going to do drugs.
Well, I think you're certainly more prone to it. And then you got that on top of, and then you mix that with just biological factors that might, genetics and stuff.
Isn't there something like layers of needs? Like
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
The hierarchy, the pyramid, the needs pyramid, right?
Yeah, that's Maslow's. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I don't feel like, again, I don't feel like I've ever been addicted to anything, but maybe that's because I've always felt like I've had people I could go to. Like maybe my problems would be much worse.
If your basic
and so
needs.
like I'm not ever crossing that threshold because I have that basic support group.
Right.
And so when I look at that, I say, well, it's not really a connection problem, but maybe that's because I've never actually had a connection problem.
Right. Yeah. And I think what's so helpful with this is then you start treating the cause a little bit more than just the problem and the symptom. You see somebody who's addicted or can't get off their phone or can't get whatever it is, can't get away from some of these vices. It's not just a avoid the vice problem. It is what are you missing? What connection are you missing?
Yeah.
So he's got in his book Connections, it was like a disconnect from nature, a disconnect from friendship, a disconnect from meaningful work, a disconnect from spiritual life. He's very much I think an atheist or a Darwinian view of the world kind of person, but he walked through that and he talked about how people groups in other countries, other cultures resolve these problems differently than we do in the States. And in the States, it's very much like you have a pain, we'll give you a pill. And that's instead of like, what is the cause? And so he was really pushing for us to consider ultimate causes. And, I think the other thing that's hard with this is we know we need to eat. And because you get hungry, you need to drink. And if you don't eat or drink, you're going to die. It doesn't seem so apparent that we need friendship. Like, will we die if we don't have friendship? Will we die if we don't have purpose? Yes. But it doesn't have the exact same, it's not as visible or it's not as easy to detect. And so, if somebody's starving, you give them a meal, it's very clear to see that is their problem and that's the answer. Just give them some food. If somebody's thirsty, give them some drink. But if somebody is depressed or addicted, we don't make that connection that it's
kind
because
of a non sequitur.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be. We don't, and so I think that's the power of this TED Talk, and that would be good for us to make that connection. Like, and I think another thing that it shows. So I just read this article a couple days ago, and I've heard this before, but this was emphasized again. That do you know that there is no type of therapy that is more effective than any other type of therapy? Like whether you do Freudian psychoanalytic lay on the couch kind of thing, or you do the new modern cognitive behavioral therapy or mindfulness practices or whatever style, they build on each other. And they think, this new therapy is going to be way more effective than the old school Freudian therapy. And they found that it doesn't matter the style you use. It doesn't matter your philosophy. And basically what they come down to is it's because of the human connection. What's most important is a healthy therapeutic relationship. And I think that's why AA works so well. It's you're put in a group, you have some human connection, and that's the healing part of it. And but then you interview the therapist, and these studies show, like the therapist said, it's because I used cognitive behavioral therapy. It's because I use this kind of therapy because I'm such a good therapist. No, it was the human connection. So that just kind of, I think, reinforces what Hari said.
Do you recommend, because I don't want to say this, I'm going to say it anyway. It's really hard to befriend people who are addicts or even just depressed or
Sure.
Oh, 100%.
Do you know what I'm saying? And so at what responsibility do we have as individuals, not as a church, but as individuals, to kind of reinforce human connection or provide it, or because it's exhausting. So I guess the thing is, for somebody who, and are we talking drugs? Are we talking anything really?
You can do anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
For somebody who's addicted, is the best thing that therapy, that connection through therapy, to identify the root cause and have that person kind of working on it with their therapist in hopes that they kind of become socially acceptable. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what is my role? Because I do take these things on because I like people.
Right.
What is my role in this? Because I just can't.
One thing that we've talked a lot about in class is like the importance of self-care. And so if you're going through like compassion fatigue, or you're like, all right, I can't do this anymore because you're draining me, you have to be careful with that. Because then you could, either fly off the handle or cut them off or say something unhelpful or do something unhelpful because you're just so drained. And we talked about this a few episodes ago, like what's our responsibility and boundaries. I don't know all the answers to that, but I think it can be helpful to at least know that what this person needs is connection. And maybe you can't provide all of it and you can't be the answer to their problems, but that's what they need. So maybe it is going to therapy and having that human connection with that therapeutic relationship. And maybe you're just one piece. You're a low dose of what that human connection they need.
But what does that look like? Is that like, hey, let's go grab coffee? Like I can think of there's one specific person I'm thinking of that I know. And I'm like, hey, I'll come over to the crib. Let's work on some music. But I'm also like, oh, what did I just say? Like, oh.
Yeah. I guess that's what I mean. I think you have to have practice self-awareness and that your self-care where you realize like, I can't keep this up. I can't do this for the long haul. I do, maybe it's, you're not able to do that, but is there a way that you could check in on them or connect with them? Maybe not. I don't know. So that would be something to pray about, and what your role is with that person. It might be a time to have a frank conversation, like, I think you need this and I wish I could provide this for you, but here are the reasons why this is really hard. Maybe that could be one way. I don't know. Matt, you're a sage. Let's hear it.
Well, is there a specific question here that you're asking?
About what Annie's situation, like how do you really help somebody practically?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to, like, my problem with this is that anytime I feel like someone's trying to like emotionally manipulate me, even if they're not, but like they're kind of doing it subconsciously, is I can't do it. Like it just ticks me off. Like I have kind of a friend, like, well, kind of a peripheral friend now, and like, friend of friends. And this has happened to me and some of my other friends where this person, will just be like, oh, like no one invites me to stuff. And it's like,
well, that's not the way to get invited to stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, sounds like you're a party,
right.
But it's also like, you don't invite us to anything, and you can just start your own thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've gotten that before, or like, I'll have a group of friends or something, and people are like, oh, like, you'll hear it like secondhand, like so and so was upset they weren't invited. It's like they, I'm not emotionally responsible for every person I know.
Right.
And then when you say to me, well, you didn't invite me to this, You never invite me to anything. You always leave me out. It's like, screw you. Now you're for sure getting
Yeah,
left
right,
out. Like,
right.
I don't want you there anymore. You know?
Yeah, right.
Well, I wonder if the way to, because how does our Christian faith build into this? Let me talk, Annie.
shaking
Let
my
me
head.
talk. Let
We
me
don't
talk. Let me talk. I think this helps us understand what the person needs. Maybe you can't be that person for them. And maybe you have to let them know, this is what you need. I can't be that person for it. And I don't know how you say that. They might not be able to receive that. But I think it helps show what they actually need. Because, yeah, I understand what you're saying, that it can be very challenging, especially if there's any kind of manipulation, especially if there is a very, very much a victimhood mentality. And it's hard because nobody is drawn to the victimhood mentality, because then they always have to be rescued. They can't take initiative. And so
It hurts it's painful to be around.
yeah.
Yes.
And like, that's so mean to say. Like, it feels so wrong to say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, that person's just always a downer.
Yeah.
And like, I can't help you.
Right.
You know? And
I think
just
that's
sucking the life out of me.
right.
I think that is where you could say, I can't be the person, but I think you should meet with my pastor, or I think you should meet with somebody who can, because it seems like you're going through a lot right now, and I can't solve all these problems for you, but I think you need some help.
So if Matt's friend, if next time he's not invited to something, or she is like, oh, woe is me, nobody
Yeah.
likes me, nobody invites me. Well, I'm not going to be that person for you, so you need to just go talk to somebody. Is that literally what the
That's
response
like-
is?
That's
I don't know
such
if
a
it's
mature
I'm not mad about that.
conversation, Ben. I'm not ready for that.
I think there's a way to say that and say,
Yeah.
that I think there's some work that you have to do on yourself, and here's my pastor's card, or here's some options. I think you need to talk to somebody, because this is like, you don't want this. I just wonder that this is a sign that you need to talk to somebody. I don't know how you say that, but there's got to be a way to say that, because I think that's the reality, is that there's probably more work than what you're able to do for this person, but that is what they need. They do need human connection. They do need need to work through these things. It's really hard when somebody's stuck in the victimhood mentality, because how are you going to get out? If that's how you identify, and unfortunately, I think that's something that's celebrated right now in our culture, is the victimhood mentality, that we all have to come to the rescue of people, but it doesn't work in the long run. And it's just really hard, because there's nothing that can help a person if they continue in that that's their identity.
So they need to be. They need professional help. I mean, we
think
all
so.
do to a degree, right? Like
Right.
that's not a criticism.
No,
Find what the root of the problem is.
right.
Don't just give me a diet pill and say,
Right.
here's how you're going to
Yeah.
lose weight. Let's change your diet. Let's change your
Right, exactly.
your
I think
routine,
so.
your lifestyle.
I think so.
Right. Instead
And
of
part of
prescribing.
and like, it's like, I could invite you and we could hang out, and like, maybe that would solve your problem, but now
that
I'm on the
moment.
hook and I don't want to be your friend.
Well, right. And for that moment, though, right? That's the thing, is like,
Right.
yes, you've appeased it for like a day. Like, okay, we went and had coffee and chit chatted,
Yeah.
but do not, like, now I'm not gonna be the go-to all the time, every time.
Right. You can't do it all.
And to basically be that would be enabling, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if
You're
you're
the
the
crutch
one
at that
the
point.
crutch, right? Like,
Right.
so at what how do we provide human connection?
And human connection is mutual. Friendship is mutual, right? And that relationship of dependent or manipulation or victimhood or come rescue, that's not a relationship. And so I think what he's talking about here is like a purposeful life and relationship.
Yeah.
That is what a person needs. Now, a person who's in a victimhood mentality, that's hard for them to have a relationship, because it doesn't go both ways. And you're not able even to enjoy similar hobbies or similar things, because all of the energy is back on them. So I do think that's where a therapeutic relationship is really helpful. Now, one final thing, like, yes, you have to be careful that, and I can do this too much where I have you have the Messiah complex that you can save everybody and you can help everybody and you can whatever. And my wife kind of points that out, like, oh, the Messiah was off today? And you're like, and that kind of thing. But I do think that, if you're in the middle of this situation and you're really struggling, I do think it's helpful to remember what Jesus said, like, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. And remember that you're not just doing it for that person. And, that isn't a long-term strategy that you have to be on the hook, like the way you said, Matt, forever. But I do think to say, in this moment, I'm trying to see Jesus here, and I'm serving this person as if they were Jesus, so that I can get through this moment and help them. And maybe it doesn't. And what we talked about a couple weeks ago about the boundaries is sometimes that I can't be your friend right now because you continue to repeat this behavior is good friendship. It's not a bad thing to say. You just have to be careful of your own motives. Yeah, it's hard.
I had another point I wanted to kind of come back to if we're good on this topic.
Yeah. Well, just one final thing to put a bow on it. I think the reason we wanted to bring this up is like it does have that connection with what we've been talking about, the importance of friendship and human flourishing, and the opposite. He says the opposite of addiction is connection. Now, as far as how we as individuals solve that whole problem, we're not going to be able to solve human connection, but at least it's good to know that's the problem and that's the solution.
Or part of it, yeah.
Part of it. So, all right, go on.
So I was going to bring up, like he talks about in the country of Portugal, right? They just decriminalized all these drugs and they instead created programs to help people. And apparently they just have amazing success over there.
Right.
And I was thinking about like, okay, decriminalizing drugs, destigmatizing drugs has to be part of that. And I just wanted to get your reactions. Like, what are your gut reactions to like when people are talking about like opioids or narcotics or something like that, like to drugs? Like what is your, like they're stigmatized kind of in this country, but like what is your honest reaction when people are talking about that or say they have a problem with it?
So this is a subject that I don't have any clarity on and I want to learn more on because I don't think legalizing marijuana is working out for Colorado and some of these places. Like, I don't think it's causing the balance that they were hoping it was going to cause. And, now you have like the extreme of when we had prohibition and we made alcohol illegal, and that just created all sorts of bootleggers and all sorts of other issues in our country. So I don't know what to feel about this. I want to research it more. I want to think about it more. I do think it's good to have consequences if you're doing something that's going to hurt you. It's good to have consequences if it's going to hurt the community. It's going to hurt society. But the reality is, if somebody gets addicted to a drug, there's no amount of consequences that is going to stop them. If they're, especially like heroin or things like that, people they see the cop right there, and they know they're going to get thrown in a jail. But that struggle is so strong that it's not a strong enough deterrent. Yeah.
Well, and oh gosh, I just forgot what I was going to say. I hate when that happens. I was so enraptured by your speaking, Ben.
Our professor in this semester is going to be going to Portugal, and I'm really interested to hear what she learns from it and what her perspective is on it. And I think it's interesting, though, the way that Paul talks in Romans 7 about, I did not know that sin was sin until the law came into place. And when the law came into place, I realized that sin was actually sinful, and it actually provoked me to do it more. The law didn't stop me. It hammered me, but I actually wanted to fight against it more. So laws don't always deter. Laws don't always help. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't know how they're pulling that off. Now, it seems like from my little bit understanding of Portugal is like, it's a 2-point two-part process. It's not just legalizing all drugs and letting it be the Wild West. It's legalizing and then putting all the emphasis on human connection and programs that focus on making sure everybody who wants a job has a job. Everybody who wants to be in a group is in a group, and that's where they're going to put the money. I don't know.
I think there's probably cultural and historical many differences between our countries that would make that more successful there than here.
Right.
Like I was going to say, it seems like in the spirit of American lawmaking that your rights extend infinitely until they butt up against someone else's. So it's like it should, under that theory, like it should be legal to do pretty much any drug in your house if you're not bothering anybody, At the same time, like we were talking about with medicine, like it seems like we give everyone that freedom, and then we just curb the results, which isn't super helpful, but it's in the interest of freedom. I'm not going to tell you how to live. Oh, you're super obese. Okay, well then we need to kind of fix some of your pain with your knees and your joints and whatever other problems you're having. Or like, oh, now you have diabetes. Okay, now we need to give you a pill. But we're not going to police your life to try to stop you from getting diabetes in the first place.
Freedom.
Because freedom.
Right.
And so it seems kind of like, it seems like we're either giving people the freedom, like nutritionally, we're giving everyone the freedom to do what they want and then just dealing with the results. And then when it comes to drugs, we're just saying no.
Right. Yeah. I don't have the answer on that one.
I think there's no question. I think it's just statement, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
it makes sense to me.
Almost seems like the worst of both worlds. Like according to this guy, it seems like we should be giving the freedom where there aren't always problems, but then maybe we should be taking the lead a little bit more when you have obvious behaviors that are going to lead to medical issues, for example.
Well, then we got pharmaceuticals that could go a whole. I'd go down a rabbit hole with that.
Well, and we've talked about
Yeah.
guns and alcohol are the same thing, where the cultures around them are just
cultures,
poison.
the money to be made off of things.
This one is a total. I think there's probably extremes. If you crack down too hard on something and you make it unbearable, that does not seem to solve the problem. Not always, at least. And then if I would like to know why this is working there. It didn't seem to connect exactly with what he was talking about, except for the point that they've put more money and focus into human connection. So now they would look at this, I think, sometimes with like an evolutionary background that we need human connection because our ancestors survived better in a group. And I think we're just designed. God said it's not good for man to be alone. That part of a flourishing life is about humans connecting, having friendships, and that's how our brains are wired. That's how we grow in our knowledge, and that's how we regulate our emotions, and that's how we regulate each other. So I think if you take a person out of how they were designed by God, things are going to go haywire. And we should expect some of this haywire tendency. And I think it does give you a little bit more compassion for somebody that they didn't necessarily choose all of these things, that a lot of it is environmental. There's a lot of situations that people are thrown into where you think, if I'm in that same environment, I might be making those same decisions. So it does give some compassion, but I think it also does give us some agency that like, all right, you were thrown this situation. Now choose a different situation. Reconnect with people. Go to AA. Go to connect with other human beings, and I'll do what I can to help you stay connected with other human beings. I might not be able to be the only human connection or the person that you need, but I'll maybe try to help you find the person that you need. Yeah.
I don't know if we should reopen it, but like with the Portugal scenario, everybody who, if you mentioned everybody who wants a job can have a job, or they'll work to get people jobs. But then I just think about like our country, and it's like, yeah, you can probably get a job, but is it going to be? Are you going to be able to provide on the job that you're that you have. So in other words, like in Portugal, if you're going to get a job, is it going to be a job that will allow you to provide for yourself, for your basic needs, housing and food and everything? So, I mean, I don't know. I guess I think ideally, yes, it would be great if we could do that, you know, in the United States. But, you know, I don't know how comparable or...
Yeah, right. It's hard to know without knowing all the circumstances and history over there. Like,
yeah.
I to me, like, I would imagine, like, if the people in Portugal are used to having a more authoritarian government,
Right.
then they're going to react really positively
Right.
to this.
Right.
We're used to freedom,
Right.
and we're very stupid with it. And so if you give us more, like, I have this whole, my personal thought is, if you just decriminalized a lot of this stuff, you just have one big, like, hellscape.
Yeah.
Of, like, every major city would just have, like, blocks and blocks of people, like, writhing around on the street.
Well,
Right.
some do.
Yeah.
Skid Row
I
and
do
things
think
like
there
that.
is, yeah, that's what the law does. It curbs. It doesn't necessarily change hearts. And I think what they're trying to get at in this talk is we don't want to change people from a deeper level and
Yeah.
get to root
Right.
causes. But
Right.
Yeah.
the laws allow for some curbing so people
right.
things don't get out of control. One other connection he makes in there is about we thought we had human connection with, you know, our Twitter followers or our social media
right.
stuff, and he talks about, but how many people do you have a face-to-face relationship with? How many close friends that would actually, you know if you were going through something hard, and so the number of close friends has been steadily declining since the 1950s. He talks about here, and so those are some environmental things where our life is looking a lot more like the choice between water and the water laced with drugs, and a lot less like Rat Park, where you have all these interactions. So
Do you
we're
know-
designing.
We've talked about this. Do you know what the average is for close friends?
I don't know if he said it in here or not. He just says it's been steadily declining.
Okay.
The amount of floor space an individual has in their home has been steadily increasing. So there's like a metaphor, like we have bigger house, more stuff, less human connection, less people around us. So
Goes back to blue zones too, which we've talked about, right? Human connection is a big part of that. Longevity.
Yeah, longevity, exactly. And that, for me, it all goes back to how we were designed, that God made us in his image and to reflect who God is. And we have a triune God, a God of love that is a community. Our God is a God that is a community, and so a community of love. And so we're supposed to reflect that, but we continue to organize our life and structure our life to fight against that. Yeah, so... That's all I have to say about that. What else you got?
Stay warm out there, people.
It's pretty chilly.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.